Let me introduce our speaker. I'm delighted to have the Reverend Greg Jones speak with us again this morning. He spoke with us last week about building the beloved community in song, voices of hope, justice, and freedom. And we had some great fun singing old protest songs. Greg is a Unitarian Universalist minister who recently retired from full-time chaplaincy, but who continues to serve as on-call affiliate chaplain at, I hate to say this, Amplify? We know what that means. It's Gunderson, okay. These days, he's focusing on choral singing and other creative arts, LGBTQ plus causes, and getting to know an expanding number of great nieces and nephews. Reverend Greg.
All right, I think I'm on. Thank you, Eric. It's so good to be with you again today, and I'm just delighted that we're having fun again. I loved the offertory this morning. It was great. Can you hear me okay? All right. I suppose I should say that I use he, him pronouns, and I think that it's part of our being tolerant and accepting of one another that we acknowledge that some of us don't use the pronouns that reflect sort of sex we were assigned at birth, but we develop in time. It's the holiday season, and one of the questions I was asked recently was, why are you talking about queer choruses in the middle of the holiday season? Shouldn't we be talking about something else? And as I shared last week, there's a burden on my heart about LGBTQ people right now. We are back in the center of the culture wars, and in particular, people who are transgender, and I'll be talking a little bit about that this morning as well. Just this past week, we learned that the city council in Arlington, Texas, decided to revoke its anti-discrimination policy against LGBTQ people because it didn't conform with the anti-DEI sentiment of the federal government. Just yesterday on Facebook, our Seven Rivers LGBTQ Center here in La Crosse posted that there was an act of violence against somebody in the LGBT community here in town on Friday night. And they didn't give a lot of detail about that, but these are things that are happening now with more frequency. And so this is an important topic to be talking about. And the reason that I put it in the context of choirs is because I have been involved in the LGBT choir movement for the past 40 years. I've been a singing member of the gay men's choruses of the Twin Cities, of Washington, D.C., and of New York City. Charles Beale, who was the author of that reading that we just had, was a director. He's a friend of mine, I can call him that, was a director that I sang under for 6 years while I was living in New York City. And I really do believe that choral singing is transformative. And it's something that is really dear to my heart. There are two terms that I want to talk about a little bit before we get started. One is the word queer. And the reason I want to mention this is because for the generation that was a generation older than I was, and my parents shared this with me early on, the word queer was a really, really, really bad word. And people didn't say it. And it was considered very vulgar. And that's been changed. LGBTQ people have reclaimed that word. And it's now used really, it's that wonderful umbrella term that we don't have to be saying LGBTQIA++ anymore. We just say we're all queer. And in some ways, we all are queer in some aspects of our lives. And so it's a term that encompasses that. The other thing I want to mention is transgender. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what it means to be transgender. Being transgender is not being transsexual. It's not being a transvestite. It means that your identity, how you feel about yourself, whether you are male or female or something in between, doesn't really match the sex that you were assigned at birth or the biological anatomy that you have. And there's a lot of folks who sort of cut corners and will say, well, of course you know whether you're male or female, just look between your legs. And the truth is that what makes us identify as male or female is really a function of our brains. And we talked last week a little bit about nervous systems and about hormones, and all of that is part of this. And there are times when there's a mismatch between how someone feels about themselves. I feel very much a male. And there's this term called cisgender. I'm a guy, and I'm okay being a guy. But I was fortunate in my class in seminary where there were 30 students. 6 of my colleagues, 6 of my fellow students were transgender in various phases of their transition. And all of them would say that they grew up really feeling completely different from who they were physically and anatomically. And so what's happening for them as they go through the transitioning is that they are beginning to conform physically to how they are in their brain and how they see themselves as an individual. And that's an important thing to remember this morning as we talk about this. So, the gay and lesbian, the queer choral movement is 50 years old. The first chorus that identified in this country as a feminist or as a woman's chorus and a feminist chorus was Anacrusis in Philadelphia, and they were formed in 1975. They originally were called the Anacrusis Women's Chorus, and now they are just called the Anacrusis Feminist Chorus. And I've learned that a lot of what we used to call women's choruses are now called trouble choruses, because there actually are some men singing in those choruses now, as there are women singing in some of the gay men's choruses that I've been a part of. And I think that's just wonderful. So the first gay men's chorus in the country was formed in 1978. The San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. It was the first chorus to use the term gay in its name. This was an important year as well. One of the things that have happened in the queer choral movement, our choruses have been, they have been voices of celebration, they've been voices of advocacy, they have also been voices of lament. And the first public performance of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus was on November 27th, 1978. That day, that morning, I'm going to try to stay composed this morning. There's a lot of this that for me is really emotional, so bear with me a little bit. But that morning, Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay elected official in the United States, were assassinated by an ex-police officer named Dan White. And that night, there was a candlelight vigil and a march. The Gay Men's Chorus had only started rehearsing a couple of weeks before this, and they were invited that night to sing at the public ceremony for Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone. And so this was the first public performance of a gay men's chorus in this country. In 1981, the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus toured the entire United States. They stopped in 8 or 9 different cities, and everywhere that they stopped, they gave a concert. Now, the New York chorus had already been formed by this time. They did stop in New York, but they also stopped in Seattle and Los Angeles and Dallas and Lincoln, Nebraska, of all places. As well as other cities. And in every city that they stopped, a chorus was formed. In Boston, in Washington, D.C., and in Seattle. And so the birth really of the gay men's choral movement as a movement in this country goes back to 1981 and this national tour of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. Now, the most recent national tour that they did actually wasn't really a national tour. It was a few years ago. They went to the Deep South, and they toured cities in the Deep South and performed as well there. And now there are choruses in places like Columbus, South Carolina. Is it Columbus, South Carolina? Columbia, South Carolina? And towns like that throughout the Deep South. They just decided to be very brave and go down. And you know, music is something that unites people. and it really transforms and changes people. And so they did that as well. 1984, the New York City Chorus was the first gay organization to perform in Carnegie Hall, and they sold it out. And they have been performing in Carnegie Hall ever since then, not every year, but many, many, many times, including for the Stonewall, the 25th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising. They sang with 4 other choruses in Carnegie Hall. There were about 500 singers. Right now, the New York City Chorus has almost 300 singers in it. And I am happy to say that I have been one of them. We'll see in a moment. I've actually sung in Carnegie Hall 3 times. It's an amazing experience. The other thing that we're going to talk a little bit about this morning is AIDS. And when we talk about voices of lament, the choruses throughout the worst years of the AIDS crisis were voices of lament. And every chorus experienced a significant loss of members. This is a picture of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. The number of people that it had when it was formed in 1981, or when it was first toured the country in 1981, all of the people that are dressed in white, the 4 or 5 of them, are the only ones that are still alive from that original group. Those were tough years. Those were tough years. The New York City Chorus lost over 200 members. I want to talk a little bit. I mentioned last week that in my research, I've discovered that one of the composers who has been extraordinarily special to me, and we're going to actually hear a piece of music that he wrote, was a man named Christopher John Anthony. He actually grew up here in La Crosse. While he lived here in La Crosse, his name was Alan Skipton. So he still has family in the area. So some of you might know his family. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse with a degree in music in 1976, and then moved to Dallas in 1985 and joined the Turtle Creek Chorale, where he was the composer in residence and the section leader of the tenor 1 section. He wrote an amazing cycle of songs called When We No Longer Touch. In 1981 or 91, this was premiered in 1991 by the Turtle Creek Chorale. I was in the audience in Denver in 1992. And I actually haven't mentioned the Gay and Lesbian Association of Choruses, Gala Choruses, which started back in the early 80s as well. It's the umbrella organization nationally of queer choruses. And they have a festival every 4 years where choruses from around the country come, around the world now, to sing together. And the national premiere of When We No Longer Touch was performed at that festival. It's an amazing piece of composition, which uses some poetry by a poet named Peter McWilliams. It includes portions of the Requiem Mass, as well as the stages of grief that were pioneered by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And there are movements of this song that go from anger to denial to bargaining, and then to acceptance, and then to hope. And they correspond with those stages of grief and loss that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about. We're going to listen to a piece of this, but I also want to mention that the composition of this song and the process that the Turtle Creek Chorale went through, producing it and performing it, became part of a 1-hour documentary from PBS that won a regional Emmy in 1994. It's called After Goodbye, an AIDS Story. I want to recommend it to you. If you want to if you have some time and want to sort of see how this particular piece of music really affected people and allowed people both to grieve, but then also to heal. It's a beautiful story. It's available on YouTube. If you just Google After Goodbye, an AIDS Story, you'll find the links on YouTube as well. I want to play part of it right now. This is the part called that corresponds to acceptance, and it's called "I Shall Miss Loving You." And the words that they're going to be singing are, "I shall miss loving you. I shall miss loving you. I shall miss the joy of your coming and the pain of your going. And after a while, I shall miss missing loving you." This is by Christopher John Anthony, a resident of La Crosse. I guess I have to. There we go. I gave a link to some of you. It's a really amazing piece of music and was written by a resident of La Crosse, a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. This was also performed in Washington, D.C. in 1996 when the Names Quilt came to Washington. I was fortunate to be living in Washington at that time and was part of the choir that sang this music that night. And you can see the AIDS quilt stretched from the Lincoln Memorial, or from the Washington Monument all the way to the Capitol building. 40,000 panels on the quilt at that time. And so, voices of lament. They've also been voices of celebration. When the Supreme Court said that gay marriage or same-sex marriage was constitutional, the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C., and I wasn't there at that time, was on the steps of the Supreme Court building, and they sang the national anthem after the decision was released. Also, after the Dodds decision recently, some of the choruses that are our trouble choruses, our women's choruses, decided to have, they commissioned a piece of music on bodily autonomy. And the concert that they sang in Denver, My Body, My Voice. So these choruses have responded to social trends, not only as voices of lament, but also as voices of advocacy, as voices of anger. And they've been very important in that regard. Soon after that, the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles decided to have a concert focused on boundary-breaking women. And in their concert, and I actually don't have the music for this, but they were encouraged, every one of them wore a shirt with the name of a woman that they said they respected and that had changed their lives. And so the other thing that's part of our choruses is allyship, supporting one another through these times. The other thing that's been happening with the choruses is they have been building bridges between the queer community and religion and traditional religion. And that's been something that has been important in its evolution because a lot of LGBTQ people were burned by the churches that they grew up with and harmed in many, many ways. This particular photo is the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and Timothy Seelig, who was the director at the time of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. And when the Mormon Tabernacle Choir came to San Francisco, they invited the Gay Men's Chorus of San Francisco to rehearse with them. And they invited Tim Seelig to direct a song in their concert that night in San Francisco. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Can you imagine? Yes. He said that he got an email from them, and he responded, he said, "Do you know who you're writing to?" And then he said, "And you realize that we are a gay chorus, right?" And they wrote back and they said, "Yes, we know that. And you realize that when we rehearse with you, we're going to wear t-shirts that say the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus." And they said, "Yes, we know that." And he was introduced as the director of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. And the director of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir was saying how important this bridge building was between their chorus and the Gay Men's Chorus of San Francisco. We now have international choruses. Coro de la Ciudad de Mexico is one of several international choruses. The Gala choruses now has over 200 choruses worldwide. The Coro Gay of Mexico had a joint concert with the San Diego Gay Men's Chorus a couple of years ago. Charles Beale was the director of that chorus at the time of the San Diego chorus, and there's a recording of him saying, we can get there in 10 minutes. Why are we not singing with them from San Diego across the border? This particular concert, was their most recent one. They had with the Pride Chorus of Houston, sang jointly with them. This is another one that we're going to listen a little bit. Hopefully the technology will be a little bit better. But the One Voice Mixed Chorus is in the Twin Cities. It's a chorus of people of all genders. And this particular piece that you're going to watch and listen to, I've got an excerpt of it, was done with the consultation of indigenous people. This was the Water Protectors. The particular song is called Water is Life. You'll see this, they filmed this outside, but they've also performed this on stage, and they also have performed this for schools. This is the One Voice Mixed Chorus of the Twin Cities. Beautiful piece. The puppetry was amazing, and really helps bring everything real. Now, this indulged me a little bit. This was from 2004. This is me right there in Carnegie Hall. I can die saying that I had my picture in the New York Times. This is the full chorus with all of its 200 members on the stage of Carnegie Hall. And this was a review that was done by Andrew Tomasini, who at the time was the primary classical music reviewer of the New York Times. It was an amazing concert, it was a privilege to sing. That was our holiday concert that year. This is my last video that I have for you. One of the things that's been happening as well are the formation of youth choruses around the country. And I was privileged to be one of the adult advisors of the Youth Pride Chorus of New York City during a time that I was there. I was with them when they did this film, this little video. If you remember back in the around 2008 or 9, there were a lot of suicides of LGBTQ teens. And there was this project called It Gets Better. I don't know if you heard about it. This is what they filmed for the It Gets Better project. We're gonna see this whole thing because it's amazing. Our youth courses are really something that is just been really vital and important. And we're grateful for this. And you'll see some amazing kids in this video. If I can get, here we go. I'm realizing that I think some of the garbled stuff is because I'm using a flash drive and that's on there. So I apologize for that poor quality. As I was watching it, I was reminded about something else that happened this past week. I got a message from one of my seminary classmates who's serving a parish in the Mid-South, who had one of their parishioners, a teenager who's transgender, died by suicide this past week. And so we need things like this. We really do. Now, I have, I actually also have an agenda this morning a little bit, and I'm realizing that we're out of time. But part of my ministry now is actually, I am in the process of working on forming an LGBTQ plus course here in La Crosse. Already have, with no publicity and having no rehearsals yet, already have almost a dozen people who've signed up to say, we're going to volunteer to help get this organized and get it started. We're having our first meeting on January 29th at the Seven Rivers Center. We're going to be recruiting non-singing volunteers, people who know a little bit about things like websites and things like that. But this is part of why I wanted to share this with you this morning, is because this really is, I shared this with folks from this congregation many months ago. Gosh, it's close to a year ago now, where I said, when I retire, this is really what I want to be working on, because I think it's really important. And we don't have enough gay men in this community to do a big gay men's course, but we have enough LGBTQ people and allies to have a mixed voice chorus. And so that's what we're going to be working on. So hopefully about this time next year, we'll be rehearsing and maybe even have our first performance. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.